This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, Isotope, SonarWorks, and API. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now on the Spectra 1964 STX100 mic pre in an API lunchbox mixed carefully through Isotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
I'd say that the advice that I took is kind of the courage to step up and just try things, even when there's a giant wall in front of you that says you can't do this or this is silly or stupid. People don't think you can manufacture things in the US anymore. And my dad was like, we're just going to make this thing happen. He just went for it. And so I've kind of got that spirit. And I think that spirit has been a very big thing.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. The API Select T25 is a classic two-channel FET feedback-style compressor limiter with a Class A tube output stage and custom API transformer, allowing split mono or stereo mode. Built with dual triode vacuum tubes, sidechain de-essing, detent controls for accurate recall, and API's famous thrust mode, the T25 represents a new design in tube compression. Bring the legendary sound of API to your home studio with the new Select T25 at apiaudio.com. You've already invested in your speakers, headphones, and the sound treatment of your studio. So you're ready to make great music, but your mixes don't seem to translate to the rest of the world when they leave the studio. The problem is that the frequency response of your room is not allowing your speakers to tell you the whole story. SonarWorks Sound ID Reference can solve this for you by calibrating your speakers and headphones EQ and balance so that you can now make better mix choices. Start with a 21-day free trial at sonarworks.com. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lij Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Tyler Campbell, CEO and founder of Alder Audio, an Ann Arbor, Michigan-based company pushing the boundaries of ribbon mic designs. Alder Audio launched in February of 2021 with the H44, a workhorse ribbon mic with a patented capsule and durable herringbone ribbon. Before founding Alder, Tyler worked in product development as a chemist and an engineer. He specialized in developing products related to materials design and has worked on a diverse array of projects from high-power lithium batteries to automotive communication cable, to adhesives that you can find on the shelf at your local hardware store. Tyler is also a self-proclaimed gear addict and a lifelong home recording enthusiast who grew up with a front row seat at his family's small manufacturing business in Wisconsin. The H44 design is a direct result of his scientific background combined with his passion for audio, recording, and small business. Now, I've been trying out the H44 and the H44S here at the Toy Box Studio, aka Recording Studio Rockstars headquarters, and I have to say these mics sound really fantastic. One of the big challenges for me when I'm recording things like drums with really bright rock cymbals or acoustic guitars where I'm really like chunking away on the strings, and electric guitars that can sometimes be too harsh, or my vocal, for example, that can sometimes have too much edge to it on certain microphones. The H44 ribbon does a beautiful job of smoothing out these instruments, smoothing out my voice, making them both mixable and listenable to me. So I'm really excited about this. I'm excited to talk to Tyler today, joining us on the show to learn more about Alder Audio and his mission to design a great microphone at a great price that's accessible for you, rock stars. Please welcome Tyler Campbell to Recording Studio Rockstars. Tyler, are you ready to rock, my friend?
Absolutely, Lij. Let's do it.
Dude, it's great to have you here, man. So you're joining us from, well, of course, when this comes out, it's going to be sunny, beautiful Wisconsin. But right now, I think it might be chilly, icy Wisconsin, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm from Wisconsin, but I'm in Ann Arbor at the moment.
Oh, right. Of course. Well, that's still a little bit chilly, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very cool, man. Give us a little bit more of an introduction to who you are. You have this fascinating background in manufacturing and designing and building stuff as a sort of a scientist, but you've also got a fascination for recording music. Talk a little bit about both those things and, how you got from being interested in those things to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure. So, I think I can perhaps pride myself on being the first chemist on your show. I don't know if you've ever had one before.
Well,
but,
we may have had chemists, but I don't think they were going to talk about it. It might have been a different kind of chemistry.
Yeah. But so anyway, yeah, I'm from Wisconsin, and I'll tell a bit of that backstory because it kind of plays in. I grew up with my dad running a small business that he started in our garage when I was in 5th grade. So he makes, and this is going to be totally random, but he makes leather saddlebags for Harley Davidson motorcycles. Wow. And yeah, so that's a whole story in and of its own. That's really fun. But I got to watch him build that product and patent a mounting bracket system for that. And I grew up working in that, area. So I was riveting bags together in high school and forming plastic and stuff. So I have that, kind of small business manufacturing reference in my background. And so, that was going on when I was growing up. But the other thing that happened when I was growing up is just a lot of music. I was always fascinated with guitar. I got in really early on guitar. And as I learned, we knew a family. It was kind of he was a math professor and he had 3 boys, and the whole family played music, and they were just kind of a higher level. And so I was really fascinated by all of that. And they got me into recording because, just watching what they were doing. And so I was super excited, 16, 17 years old in high school. All I wanted was an SM58 and a Tascam DP01. That was the thing that I could get at the time. So yeah, it's like a little, digital multi-track recorder. And so I played around with that ever since high school. Eventually, bought a condenser mic and have kind of been doing that thing always. So all the home recording enthusiasm and whatnot. And that's followed me through my whole story. But then what I actually went to school for, I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I got my degree in chemistry. Always was kind of fascinated with chemistry. And then because of kind of my story, and I got married, and my wife, we had to move to a different state. So we went from Wisconsin to Vermont to now to Michigan. And so in each of those places, I had different industry jobs. And so I developed batteries in Madison. Then I went to Vermont and I worked on cable, which had a surprising amount to learn about for audio, because I was working on, this is going to be another out there thing. I was working on twisted pair cable for communication in your car. So like all your entertainment systems and whatnot, I was the one designing the polymer and the cable to twist together. You have to pick the right material. So I've been involved in design of things that have to do with materials. And I designed that cable to carry data, which taught me a lot about impedance. Yeah. And so, you learn things in these unexpected places. And so that played a big role in helping me understand that complicated topic. And then we moved to Michigan, and my job here was working in adhesives. That's another materials, kind of product development area. So I'd been doing that for a while. And then just kind of all along the whole time, I've always had that kind of entrepreneurial stripe from my dad. And I've done just lots of different projects. I have done, maybe we'll talk about them in some of the later questions, but lots of stuff with guitars and circuits. And I built a cajon at one point.
Nice.
And, just all those DIY audio projects. And in the back of my mind, every project is kind of like, I'm doing this for its own sake, but could it turn into a business? Maybe, we'll see. And every other idea that I had done like that had kind of fallen. The idea didn't really carry, it was interesting, but didn't have enough legs. And when I decided to make my first ribbon mic, I researched it a lot. I've got that scientific brain, so I wasn't going to just buy a kit or make it the way that somebody else would make it. I wanted to like make it very unique.
Yeah.
And so from day one, my first design, which I still have, it's this like crazy rickety looking thing. It had a very unique kind of geometry to it. And there was kind of a theory I was working off of. And I made that mic and it just kind of clicked. It was like, this is working. This is something kind of, yeah, I usually don't do this well on the first pass of a project. And so while I was working at that, adhesives job, I was building a ton of iterations of microphones and looking up patents and reading BBC technical bulletins from the 50s on the development of the Coles microphone that what's turned into the Coles now. A lot of that stuff is publicly available because ribbons had like the major amount of ribbon development happened in the 50s.
Yeah.
So, the history of all that, you can go and read like a lot of really cool background of the development. So I was just pouring through all that stuff and then bringing it right into designing a bunch of mics just in my, time at home and whatnot. And eventually it got good enough to, I said, I think this thing kind of wants to be out in the world. Like it's unique and I think it's valuable. So I decided to pull the trigger, quit the job and launch the company about 1 year ago.
That's cool. And, when you bring up the BBC, that's one of those things that when you begin to do research, you discover they were very open about the designs because I think a lot of it, it was a public broadcasting company. So everything that they were building and designing was, maybe it was like thought of as being owned by the public anyway. So you can even go find like, a design for a vocal booth so that you can, they wanted everybody to be able to build the perfect studio and the perfect vocal booth and use mics and stuff. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Also a little bit like Jensen was like that, if you go look and do research on Jensen transformers, you discover that there's all these open to the public circuit designs for how to build stuff using the transformer, which is kind of cool stuff to discover. Well, that's a great story, man. I love hearing about that. And it's interesting to hear you talk about trying some of those different, well, first of all, it's exciting knowing this microphone that you've built that you are into things like circuit designs and other stuff because, something may be coming down the pike. More stuff is coming down the pike, I'm sure. But, hearing you talk about arriving at the ribbon mic design is the one that stuck, I forgot what the word was that you used, but that's a big part of creating something, and marketing something is you got to have the brilliant idea, you got to have the enthusiasm, but it has to match something that everybody's actually has a need for and a want for. So that's cool. And I imagine that must have been part of the discovery for you.
Yeah. Just everything about it kind of fit. Like the word I put to it is that it just kind of showed up to me as this has legs. Like this wants to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas I had other projects, like I did this crazy project where I put 5 single coils in a Strat. And then I had this kind of innovative switching system where one of the knobs turns into a rotary switch. And so it's this kind of crazy thing. And I still love that guitar. I actually think it's a good idea. But I was going to try to like, can I sell this? Can I sell preloaded pickguards or something like that? And that was all push. That was like, I'm trying to make this a thing that people might want.
Yeah.
And the ribbon mic, when I got done with it, it was like, this is really good. And I don't even need to explain it. Like if people just could try it, they'll immediately get it. Like and so it just kind of showed up that way when I made it.
Well, so the 5 pickup thing, they're sort of like, from the bridge up to the neck, sort of 5 pickups in that zone or something like that?
Yeah. So essentially what I did is the idea on that project was that, a humbucker has 2 single coils inside of it, and sometimes you split them. But I said, well, instead of going that way, what if I just do individual single coils all the way? So you've got 2 single coils in the neck right next to each other, kind of like a humbucker. And then you got the regular Strat, in the middle, and then you've got 2 single coils right next to each other in the bridge. Mm-hmm. And the way the rotary switch worked is that on position 1, it worked just like a regular Strat. So it used the 3 Strat-like pickups that were, neck, middle, bridge. But then when you switched it to position 2, in my head, it was like trying to emulate as best of a Telecaster sound as you could get out of the Strat. And so I had a different single coil in the neck that I was referencing. And then in the bridge, I was using they call it the twang banger pickup. It's a single coil pickup with a brass plate under it that kind of simulates that Telecaster metal plate.
Oh,
and
cool.
so it's made to, I think it's a Seymour Duncan. It's made to give you that twangier telly tone on a Strat. And so, when you go to position 2, you would just have those 2 pickups. And so the 3-position switch or 5-position switch now, positions 1 and 2 are the same. Position 3 is like both pickups like a telly would be. And position 4 and 5 are also the same. They're both the bridge. And then finally, the third click, I wired the neck and the bridge in series with each other. So it was kind of like a humbucker. So you have, the neck 2 single coils in series, the bridge 2 in series, and then everything switched. So it was the idea for a very versatile, do everything guitar.
I got a suggestion for you.
Sure.
I know you moved on to better visions, but I've got a suggestion for you for that one. When I heard you say the rotary switch, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you, because there was a time somebody made a guitar once where the pickup actually physically moved back and forth from the bridge to the neck. I remember hearing about that. I thought, why don't you make a circuit that will rotate like a phaser rotates through, it'll cycle through those different pickups so you could play a chord and like the tone just kind of like phases out just from switching through the pickups. That would be kind of fun.
That would be interesting. My head goes straight to like, okay, how do you wire that?
Exactly. Don't go straight to product development on that one, though. Don't take one of Lidge's ideas straight to product development, not unless you want to lose your shirt on it. But anyway, that's really fun, man. And I love the invention side of doing this stuff. So do you what is your world like? Do you have a studio set up that you like to go play music in and record in, but do you also have like sort of an invention bench area where you can just go experiment with ideas and build stuff, kind of a workshop environment?
Yeah, so Alder is very small. It's kind of intentionally small because I do make every mic at this point. And I have a little tiny studio space that is what I record in and do all of that, learning about my mics. I try to do my own work with a lot of my mics just to know them better. So I'm always kind of working on something. But then there's also some test stuff in there. So I have this big box that I built that I can run some frequency responses inside of for QC and whatnot. So that's kind of like the studio room. And then there's kind of a workshop space, which is 2 tables. We got some 3D printing going on. There's some bench grinding going on, and just kind of all the tinkery stuff is out there. And then there's a little shipping kind of area.
All right.
Yep.
Now, did you start out by saying you're building all the mics yourself too?
Yes. Wow. If you order an Alder mic, I built it with my hands.
That's pretty cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice to know that you built the one that I'm holding in my hand right now. In my studio, I've got the Mac Mini M1 paired up with the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution to connect to all my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The Spectra 1964 C610 comp limiter brings fast, clean, quiet compression and limiting to your recordings and mixes. The C610 includes the famous Spectra 101 amplifier used in legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, and Record Plant. I love using my C610s for drums, vocals, guitars, and especially bass, which now sounds bigger than anything I've ever recorded before. Make your mixes rock at spectra1964.com. I am holding the H44, and it's a beautiful mic. It's about I don't think of myself as having big hands, but it's similar to the length of my hand, from palm to finger or whatever. And it is I don't know. It's about as the diameter is or circumference is rather is about like a silver dollar or something like that. Is that about right? The size?
Yeah, inch and a half. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then the logo's gorgeous, man. I love the A for Alder there. It's almost like it looks a little bit like a number 4 too. Looks like mountain peaks.
Yeah, I just liked that logo when it crossed. I actually have a family member that does some graphic design, and so we worked on it together. And we went through all kinds of different ones, and I was almost determined to do a different one, not the logo we landed on. And this one just kind of popped. It kind of to me looks like it's got a bit of a sound wave in it. It kind of has an audio feel to it, and I wanted to do something different and not just put like a sticker onto the mic. And so because the bodies of the mic are laser cut out of stainless steel, I could draw whatever I wanted and then just back the metal and with a different metal, so kind of get a much fuller, deeper kind of sense it with your hands type of situation. And so, yeah, we like how that turned out.
Yeah. And then down on the bottom now where the XLR goes in, the ring around there kind of has the mic model. And then, I think this one says patent pending, but when this podcast comes out, it's I don't know anything about that, but I imagine that, going down that world of patents and everything, that's a whole nother topic and a deep sort of bunch of paperwork and things, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the basic thing is you really need a patent lawyer. These days, you can't really do a patent well without getting a patent lawyer because it's almost like speaking a whole different language. They just have all this stuff about how to do it that's kind of particular. But as far as my patent, that's recent news for me. So I had submitted it and it came back. They call it an office action. So they might have issue with how you worded something that it might overlap. So we did one office action to say, okay, let's clarify this. And then they recently came back and said, like, you are all good to go. So it is not filed yet, so you can't go find it publicly. It will be by the time that this podcast comes out. But I can stand assured right now that patent is going to be a real approved thing.
That's the trip, man. What a effort to go through to bring us great recording tools. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Well, so tell us a little bit about that experience for you of building and designing that first ribbon mic. I mean, like, what were some of the things that you had to think about? And, what do you grab in your left hand and your right hand and start putting them together, on a bench?
Yeah, well, the first thing is just the physical nature of it. Like a ribbon mic is very physical, and that's actually part of what I love about it, because the things that I did to design it different are all like geometrical and material based. It's not as much about the circuit. It is about the transformer, but
it's kind of like building a great guitar. The body of the guitar has to have great materials and great craftsmanship, right?
Yeah. And that's like, I have a passion for that. So I love high-end acoustic guitars. I don't really have any, but if I can ever play one at a shop, like here, there's a famous shop in Michigan called Elderly Instruments. And like, it's one of my favorite places to go visit because they'll let you play stuff. And to me, there is something beautiful about a really well-made acoustic guitar that you can hear in the room that you just can't capture otherwise. And it's a physical thing. It's the wood vibrating, and I get excited about that kind of design. Same thing with like resonator guitars with like a really well-made cone and stuff. And so ribbon mics get me excited because they are exactly like you said, they feel analogous to that to me. It's not about designing the best circuit. It's actually about, physical craftsmanship, which, gets me going. So,
Yeah, Elderly Instruments, they're a builder of guitars and stuff, right? They're one of those ones that they make beautiful instruments, banjos, guitars, and stuff like that, but they're also affordable, right?
I don't know if you're thinking of the same one. They have a big online store. They sell a lot of vintage stuff, and they have a really good repair department. I know they do a lot of work.
Okay.
But they're just like a fantastic independent, guitar shop.
Cool. Dig it. All right. Well, anyway, I like that. And then, yes, I was also looking at really nice acoustic guitars the other day, and I was like, how much is this one? Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to get, save up for that one. That's great. Okay. So in the craftsmanship and the construction of this stuff, I think back to some of your experiences too, building audio cable and adhesives, and you must know a lot about materials and how they go together, how to make materials. Probably you know something about, you know, the lifespan of materials too, I would imagine, working in the auto cabling.
Yeah, all of it. There's a deep well of all of it that applies to the ribbon mic. I mean, just the nature of it, the ribbon being so thin and fragile, and what I came up with the herringbone later on. It's all kind of, you know, manipulating materials properties. But actually, I never got to your first question of the first mic, what it's like to put it together. The big thing with that first mic is I wanted to change the design, and so I had looked up, and one big thing that I'd read about is that in a ribbon mic, you've got, you know, kind of two magnets with the ribbon in between. But the magnets are usually on some kind of picture frame type of piece of metal. So there's kind of a frame around the magnets. And it's been really well documented, this is no secret, that the narrower you make that assembly, the more high frequency response you get. So it's a very physical thing. And so you see, if you look up ribbon motors, so there will be people that kind of make them like hourglass shaped or kind of like with an X in the middle, because they're trying to make the central area as narrow as possible so that the distance from the front of the ribbon to the back of the ribbon around all the, you know, assembly is short. And I wanted to make that like as short as you could possibly make it. And so one of my ideas was to suspend the magnets so that, you know, you didn't have any frame. You just had magnets and they were kind of held at the top and the bottom. And then your cross section in the middle would be as narrow as possible. So I came up with this wild idea to make this kind of circular frame at the top and the bottom. And I was like, well, how do I make this? And so I actually called up my brother, who now runs my dad's business back in Wisconsin. They've got a laser cutter. So we worked together. He drew the parts and we laser cut this crazy big, I mean, it looks, it's on Instagram, the original mic. It's just got this big circle on the front of it. And then I was like, well, I need to mount this to something. It's on a yoke and I needed just a body to house a transformer and to put an XLR jack. And I was like, what can I do? So I ended up going to the hardware store and just buying a piece of black pipe. So just like your, you know, like black iron, you know, with the big caps on the top and bottom.
Yeah.
And so I put the transformer in there. I drilled a hole in the bottom cap. It's just like 6 inches worth of like a pipe connector. And then I bolted the yoke onto the top. And so my first mic just looks like this Frankenstein monster, you know, kind of crazy thing.
Awesome. Are you going to send one to Sylvia Massey for her microphone museum? Maybe one day it'll be, that original prototype will be on display.
Yeah, well, I'm quite fond of it myself at the moment, but you know, it would belong in a place like that.
Right on, man. That's cool, man. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, and maybe we can keep breaking down the basics of how a ribbon works too, and like, you know, how does sound go from the sound of an instrument through a ribbon mic to, you know, into my Pro Tools, for example, if you'd care to break down the basics for the rock stars.
Yeah, sure. No problem. I mean, for ribbon mics, it's actually, I think, one of the more simple ones to understand. And so inside the mic, you have, you know, two vertical magnets. And so between the two of them, there's this big magnetic field. And then in between those, that's where you put just a crazy thin strip of aluminum. And that's nothing like, you know, aluminum foil in your kitchen. It's the type of thing that is, you know, it would kind of turn to dust in your hand really easily. Wow. If you kind of, yeah, it's crazy to handle it. Like, it's honestly, as somebody who works with it, it's kind of terrifying. Like, because it's just scared to know you're producing something that fragile that's out in the world, but there's a lot that we do to kind of, you know, mitigate the danger of damage or whatever.
I'm going to put mine back in the plastic sleeve while we're talking. I'm getting nervous.
Well, I mean, we can talk about that later, because my ribbon, the way I corrugate it with the herringbone is stronger than almost anything out there. There's I think one mic that uses Shure's got the Roswellite ribbon. Anyway, that's a different topic, but it's quite hardy for a ribbon mic.
Well, I know my Coles, for example, is very fragile. You have to be very, very careful moving it around and stuff. And once it stopped working. So ribbons can be destroyed in the studio. There are things that we need to be caring for, rock stars. You know, don't send it fan and power. And maybe you can talk about that if there's more for us to learn about that. But, you know, don't don't blow into it. Don't wave it around in the air. Don't wave it in the air at your friends. Go, look at my new mic. So you want to be, just caring of it.
Yeah.
But mine did blow on my Coles mic. It blew once, and I thought, before I send it off, I'm going to take a look at it myself. Maybe I can figure this thing out.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened it and I looked in there and I moved my hand up and down just a little bit when I was holding it. And I watched this ribbon. It looked like a spider's web, just like a single strand of a spider web just floating in the air.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea how fragile this thing was.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's cool to hear that this one, that your design makes it more robust and, less worrisome. So talk a little bit about that if you want to. What does that mean for us? Like, how does the robustness of your mic design translate into use in the studio at all?
Yeah. So first, just a note, the Coles has a thinner ribbon than almost anything I'm aware of. So that one is quite extreme. But what I've done with my ribbon is, as somebody who works with these, I mean, this is a scary thing for me because I just very much want this mic to work for people. And I also think that ribbons are fantastic in the studio and that they're more popular with kind of studio engineers than home recording people. And so I'd really like to make a really good ribbon more available to kind of regular home studio people. But that also makes me worry about the ribbon being, like fragile, the fragile nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that I came up with, which is part of the patent, is called herringbone ribbon corrugation. And so normally with a ribbon, the corrugations are flat. It's a gear that puts the up and down in the ribbon. You just kind of run it through a gear. And I run my ribbon through a set of herringbone gears that I designed and 3D printed myself.
Now, just for an aside, did you try tweed and seersucker as well? Sorry, dumb clothing joke there.
Yeah, that's. I have to stretch my brain in the other direction here. I'm like thinking technical. So
you run it through the herringbone generator.
Yeah. Well, so herringbone gear is difficult to describe. The best thing that I can do is just recommend you Google it. It's a known thing. It's a gear with two angles in it, so that it's like a V shape all the way down the ribbon that it crimps. So it's not a straight line. And and that makes it a lot stronger. And part of the reason that I know this is actually my work way back in my dad's shop, is that we used to do a lot of work with like those metal brackets to hang those saddlebags off of. And if you work with metal framing, bending is like a really helpful trick. You use it all the time. So just a basic bend would be like a right angle, so a flat bar bends easily, but angle iron doesn't bend because you have to bend against, the bend of the 90. But if you take a piece of angle iron and you try to unbend the 90 degrees, that's easy. So it depends on kind of like which axis, it is versus where the bend is. So a really great thing is if you can get a double bend in a piece of metal, if you can kind of bend it 2 angles at once, because then it doesn't have really a weak spot. And so that's what I'm doing with the herringbone ribbon, is that it has crimps in 2 axes at the same time. And so that really makes it stand up. So I have a video about it online where I do a fan into both a regular ribbon and the herringbone ribbon. And the herringbone ribbon does not deflect nearly as far back. So it's just got a lot more kind of stability to it versus regular corrugation.
That's cool. You're basically doing microphone origami.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Microphone or origami works.
Yeah. And so I forgot to mention it already, man, but what are we listening to your voice on right now?
This is the front of the original H44.
Oh, cool, man. Right on. Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always someone in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to add collaborators to a project so that the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music. Just upload a voice memo or song and start commenting. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now now at Samply.app or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. Want to know how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? Well, I've been cheating all along by using Isotope RX and Ozone on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, EQ, and limiting on this podcast episode. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. When you say the front, maybe it's worth mentioning why the front and the back are, important with your mic design.
Yeah, so this is a dual voice ribbon, so it sounds different from the front than it does from the back. And the back of the mic is probably the easier one to describe because it's a little more like what people expect from a ribbon. It's got a little more smoothness to it, and I generally tend to prefer it on like overheads and guitar cabinets. But the front is the side where I've really kind of done something funky with the geometry. So the front has kind of a punch to it. I developed it specifically for vocals. So I kind of think of the H44 as a vocal mic from the front and kind of a normal ribbon mic from the back.
That's wild. Yeah. So, and I've been using mine and you can hear the difference on them. I'm curious to hear the description of the difference, and then I'll talk a little bit about like what my experience was when I was using it and having headphones on and all that, because I think there's important stuff to talk about there. But is it worth describing sort of the EQ curve of the difference of the front and the back, or is that or like how we hear a different tone?
So here's the weird thing about EQ curves. And I don't have one published on my mic yet that's out there, but they're standardized at a certain, length away from the source. And so things like proximity effect and things about, how they respond to different signals don't get captured in an EQ curve. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening in the front of my mic is that I've manipulated the geometry. I won't get too technical, but I'll just say sound, whenever it goes out, it goes through 4 like physical phenomenon. So you have reflection, which is pretty understandable, absorption, which we're all familiar with from acoustic treatment, but then the 2 confusing ones are diffusion and refraction. Refraction's like light through the, glass of water that, the pencil in the water that looks side, that's light diffracting, refracting. But anyway, those 4 things are happening and they all happen differently at different frequencies and situations. And so the geometry inside employs some reflection and stuff that kind of changes the way the high frequencies relate versus the low frequencies, but it also depends on proximity. And so an EQ curve doesn't actually show a ton of difference between the front and the back, but you can hear it. And so I have a hard time trying to capture it. Yeah. But what I can say is that I can just tell the story of how it was developed. How it was developed is that I tried a bunch of things and one of them sounded really good on vocals. Nice. That's just, at the end of the day, that's kind of the story.
Very Edisonian of you.
Yes. I've used that exact example in a different situation. We used to talk about that in engineering, kind of the Edison version of product development versus more of a scientific theory. And I think you need both.
Yeah. I think it'd be good if you don't electrocute elephants as part of your demonstration. Maybe you could just record some elephants instead.
Yeah, I think we can avoid that.
Yeah. I mean, there was the whole, Tesla versus Edison battle for like whose version of electricity was going to be the one that we get to use, for good. Tesla won because we're using alternating current. And we like alternations in current because that's sound.
Absolutely.
Maybe I kind of cut you off, which I do a lot of that on this podcast. Maybe we should circle back and complete the description of how sound goes from, a voice into the microphone into our recording.
Sure. So, we talked about the magnets, you got the ribbon in between there. And with a ribbon, it's really fragile. So it's that makes it really sensitive. It picks up transients and things like that because it's so light. It's lighter than any other, microphone element. But so the sound is a pressure differential. So it's low pressure, high pressure. And so the sound goes to that ribbon and makes it vibrate. And then that's a piece of metal vibrating inside of a magnetic field. And so just physics happens and you get just a tiny, tiny, tiny little electric current that is induced in that ribbon. So you make a connection at the top of the ribbon, the bottom of the ribbon, and then you can use that signal. But it's so tiny, if you plugged it into your interface, you would get, zilch. You wouldn't even know it was there. And so the one piece of electrical equipment that you need inside of a ribbon mic is a really good transformer. And so that's kind of a big piece of the sound because the ratio on the transformer, like on a dynamic microphone, the ratio might be like 4-to-1. That's about what it is in an SM58. But for a ribbon mic, it might be anywhere from 20-to-1 to like 40-to-1.
Wow.
And so you're dealing with a much more challenging transformer situation.
So this tiny, tiny electricity that's generated by the ribbon moving between the two magnets comes out the either end of the ribbon, right? The ends of the ribbon are connected to the wires. So there's this little bit of current or voltage difference that's happening there. And that goes over to the transformer, which then brings in some more magnets, right?
Yeah. Well, so the transformer isn't a magnet itself, but it has a core that is magnetic iron or material.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
And then the transformer, like essentially it ups the voltage. So like if it was a 20-to-1 transformer, your voltage would be 20 times bigger coming out the end of the transformer. But energy can't be created or destroyed. So when you lose 20 times the voltage, you're going to make up for that in amperage. So it ends up as a higher voltage, lower amperage signal, which is kind of synonymous to saying it's a higher impedance signal.
Okay. All right.
So there's a challenge with the transformer because you need to up the voltage high enough to make it have a good output for your interface. But if you make the impedance too high, the interface won't accept it. So there's kind of a whole balanced transformer thing, but the details of that are probably less important to get into. The basic principle of it is the little tiny signal goes into the transformer bumps up the voltage, and then that voltage goes through the cable right to your interface so that your interface can see that voltage and amplify it and put it into your computer.
What do we need? Do we need to be thinking about which mic preamp is a good match for a ribbon mic? Is that something worth considering, or is it really no different than having a variety of mic preamps in our studio and we just listen to them with any given mic and decide which one we like the sound of best?
So that's an interesting topic. With mic preamps, there is a thing with ribbon mics that ribbon mics, especially if they're a little higher impedance, they will sound different more so on preamps with different input impedances to them. And so, people make ribbon specific preamps, but I would say that in general, I tend to be less worried about that than other people. Like some people get really into like, well, you only need this through this ribbon, interface or ribbon preamp. And it's not going to ruin the sound of the mic. It's just going to change it, especially in the low end. So it might attenuate the low end a little bit, but it's not nearly as severe as, say, taking a piezo pickup in an acoustic guitar and plugging that directly in without a buffer.
Right.
Like, I don't know if you've ever done that
straight into your guitar amp, for example.
Yeah, so I did that at one point. I got my little piezo pickups inside of my acoustic.
Yeah.
And if you can, and people do, plug them right into the system, but there's a huge impedance mismatch. And it's not that it doesn't work. It's just, it sounds thin and lifeless because it's complicated to describe, but the impedance of the signal isn't actually just one number. It changes with frequency.
Right.
And so as the signal gets lower, the impedance is getting less and less ideal. So that's kind of what's happening. And then the lows are kind of getting reflected and attenuated. And so that's why when you get that high impedance acoustic guitar signal, you want to plug that into some kind of preamp or buffer box not to up the signal level, but to change the impedance so that it doesn't start to cut out all your lows.
Yeah. So I was guilty of building a piezo pickup and gluing it into my violin bridge and then just plugging that straight into my big Music Man, 112 watt guitar amp with with of all things that had a 15-inch speaker on it, like talk about impedance mismatches. And I've shared this on the podcast before, but my buddy said his friend referred to my violin sound, my fiddle sound on stage as like getting your teeth drilled at the dentist. So impedance is important in some aspects, but it's cool to hear that, there's a lot of versatility and flexibility with the ribbon. Now, when I plugged my H44 in, I used the H44S's, a pair of those, as spaced overheads on drums, and those went directly into my STX Spectra 1964 STX 100 preamps, and they just sounded great. They sounded fantastic. And then I did the H44 into my Tegeler Audio VTRC, and that's sort of like a tube, like recording channel with mic pre, EQ, compression, output. And again, that's got a couple of different input knobs, so you can kind of sculpt it a little bit there. But that just sounded great, just like that. So in my experience, I didn't even have to think about the mic pre at all. I just plugged it into a good mic pre, and it sounded great.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to know that input impedance is a thing. And then if you have, variable input impedance, either on your, maybe a booster for the mic, or you have it at the preamp, it's nice to know that that can play a role with ribbon mics. But what I was trying to say with the guitar is that the difference in impedance that you're worrying about is not nearly to the scale of your dentist drilling violin experience,
Right.
So it's less of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's see here. So again, we got sound coming out of our voice. It's moving the air. It's basically resonating the pressure in the air like waves coming across the water until it hits that ribbon inside the microphone. That ribbon's between those two magnets and moving between the magnets. It's like a reverse of a motor. I mean, I think you even referred to it as a motor, didn't you? Didn't you say ribbon motor?
Yeah, people call them ribbon motors sometimes.
Yeah. So then that creates electrical voltage on the wire that goes down to the transformer. One thing that I always love about transformers is this notion of like one side doesn't really touch the other side,
Yep.
It's like the electricity is on one side, it's wrapped around the iron core, and then that just sort of generates a magnetic force that gets picked up on the other side at a different winding. So you get this amplification of voltage. That goes into the mic preamp. That brings it up to a line level that then goes into your interface. Now, if you're using an interface with built-in mic preamps, is there anything we need to mention about that? Or that would you just forget about thinking about the mic pre, you just turn up the gain and there it is in your Pro Tools session.
Yeah. It's just like any other mic. I'm plugged into Motu M4 at the moment, and it handles the gain just fine. I would say the only thing is that if you are straight into an interface and you're recording like either a quiet source or a source that's really far away, an inline mic booster like a Cloud Lifter or many of the other ones that are out there, is a good thing to have in your pocket so that if you want the extra boost, you've got it available.
So do those Cloud Lifter kind of options, do they also do the impedance matching as part of what they do? Or are they more for getting some additional gain before you get to your mic preamp?
Well, I'd say they're mostly for the additional gain, especially the more popular ones, because they're just going to have a single input impedance. But there's actually some people out there now that are doing more of a selectable input impedance on the booster itself. I think TE just came out with a new version of the Dynamite that I haven't tried yet, but it looks quite promising because it has selectable input impedance. And that's a nice tool to have in your pocket.
Are you already brainstorming new ideas for next stuff? Or are you like, did you have to shut off that part of your brain and just say, dude, we're just doing ribbon mics for right now?
Oh, that part never shuts down. And honestly, it's really hard to make myself just like settle down and do the work of like making the design that's already done, because I always just want to I love product development. I mean, I could do that just constantly.
I'm pretty sure there's a parallel between that and us hitting our recording studios. And, the difference between, I just want to do something fun and new versus, okay, I'm going to go back in and continue working on that song or clean up the edits on that last recording I did, or, take the mix that extra 10% and get it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first rule of mixing is make good mix choices. To do that, you need to be able to hear your music clearly and accurately. Can you imagine trying to paint a masterpiece while wearing rose-colored glasses or choosing spices for a new recipe with no sense of taste or smell? You would blindly guess with every brushstroke or think that your cooking is amazing when actually it's terrible. That's how it feels to mix when the frequency response of your room is impacting the sound of your music. Even after you carefully position your speakers and sound treat your room, you're probably not getting an accurate sound at your mix position. The frequencies in your room can have huge peaks and valleys that are completely screwing up your perspective. This is where SonarWorks Sound ID reference can help you with the affordable solution for calibrating EQ and balance of your speakers and headphones to give you an accurate flat frequency response. By helping you to hear your music clearly, you can now start to get your mixes right. Get a 21-day free trial at sonarworks.com. The API Select T12 is a 2-channel, all-tube Class A microphone preamp designed with API's proprietary AP2516 transformer on the input stage and a custom API transformer on the output stage. Built with the 12 AT7WC and 12 BH7 dual triode vacuum tubes, the T12 represents a new and exciting variation on API's classic preamp technology and provides you with unique tonal options for your studio, handling a wide range of recording applications, including stereo operation. Carefully engineered to provide classic tube performance and sound, the T12 brings you API's famous warmth, punch, and clarity in a new design, including a 5-year warranty. Check out the new T12 Tube Mic Pre and T25 Tube Compressor at apiaudio.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Tyler Campbell, joining us from Alder Audio in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's a lot of A's. Are you ready to jam, Tyler?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool, dude. Well, glad to have you on the show. Tell us what's the difference between the H44 and the H44S. Why would we, you started to talk about it, but maybe let's clarify that a little bit more.
Sure. So the H44 was the original mic. It has the dual voicing, so the front that's kind of more vocals oriented and the back that's more regular ribbon. And I was getting requests from some people who didn't like that it wasn't symmetrical because they might want to use it for mid-side. Or even more than that, what I really found is that there's some engineers out there who just want the ribbon mic to be a ribbon mic. Like they've got a locker full of vocal mics that they've invested in. They're not really planning on using this on anything but maybe drum overheads or something like that. And they don't even want to think about the sides and remember which one is which or anything. And so I was getting requests for a symmetrical version. And that was pretty easily done within my power. So I kind of tweaked the design and created the H44S, which is symmetrical. So it has a voicing that is nearly identical to the backside of the H44. So it's that kind of classic ribbon sound, except for it's on both sides. So you can use it for mid-side or, in the middle of a room between two sources or whatever else.
Let's not leave Blumline out.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is just a funny word to say.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. Well, very, very awesome. Now, the H44, which has the vocal voicing on one side, again, would we describe that as having a little bit more warmth in low end or more high end in clarity? What's a take on that for you, or that feedback you've gotten from your users?
Well, so to start, as far as vocal mics go, I think it is, clearly an alternate choice to a condenser. And so, it doesn't have that crispy condenser high end, and ribbons are pretty famous for their smooth high end. And so there's kind of a natural smoothness there. And it does have a lot of low end. So it's in that category of, maybe you're thinking about an SM7B or something like that. This might be another interesting vocal mic in that category. But as far as ribbons go, in comparison to other ribbons, all I can say, it's not really about frequency response. It's not about like saying it has this extra high end sizzle on top compared to a normal ribbon. I'd say it just has like a presence punch. Like when I do another ribbon mic or I do the back, the vocal sounds a little dull, and you just what I think in my mind is like, this is not a vocal mic. And then when you turn it to the front, there's just a kind of a presence and a punch to it that is just well suited to vocals in that kind of vocal mics besides condensers category.
So I used a pair of H44Ss. I sort of had that same question. I was like, well, I really want to do overheads for the drums. So I was feeling like having that symmetrical matched pickup pattern made sense, and it wasn't going to be a vocal on it. I am curious now. I haven't had a chance to listen to the H44 above the drums, but it would be very interesting to hear, like, well, what do the drums sound like with the, that punch and clarity and stuff. So might be worth exploring, Rockstars. Of course, if you had a pair of H44s, you could flip them one way or flip them the other way, and you've got a variation right there. But I did the H44Ss on overheads, and I knew before they even showed up that I was looking forward to using ribbons on the drums. So one of the challenges for me sometimes in the studio is with condenser mics, drums can sound fantastic, right? You can really get a great sound on the overheads, or you can do a Glyn Johns miking or whatever. But sometimes the cymbals can just rip your head off. There's Rockstars, you maybe experienced that before. You get to the mix stage and you're trying to crank things up, and the cymbals are just tearing your head off, And so going for a ribbon setup on the overheads does a wonderful job of helping to tame that. And the last session I did, it was a drummer that I had that challenge previously with a condenser mic, because he's got a lot of bright, powerful cymbals. And when I did the same miking with this drummer using the H44Ss, a pair of those as overheads, it's like all that went away, and it was exactly what I was hoping for, and it was really wonderful. So that's a really great experience and a use case for me, I think, in the studios, and for you, Rockstars, is to consider that sometimes, and we talked about this recently with somebody else in the show too, but sometimes it's good to think about matching opposites. So like, for example, if you've got a drummer that's really got bright, aggressive cymbals, then doing the opposite and choosing a ribbon mic, which is going to smooth that, is the right approach. Versus if you've got somebody with really dull, dark cymbals, then maybe those would be the times where having a pair of condensers up above is the way to go. And so having both those options in your studio is a really, really powerful, color palette for you. I figured I'd stop talking for a second, let you come in too. I got more to say, but I don't want to eat up all the time. So, what feedback have you gotten from people about that sort of stuff?
Well, some of the earliest feedback I got is just people loving it on drums. One local engineer that I did some work with has a pair of them, and I really made the mic to be like a workhorse mic. Like the idea was, your workhorse condenser that can do work just all over the studio. Mm-hmm. I wanted to bring that concept into a ribbon mic, these dual voicings and all this. And he goes, I can't believe you designed this as a general purpose mic, because it really sounds like you designed it as an overhead mic. So they really loved it on overheads. They really loved it on room sounds. But I kind of kept track with the same guy, and I had touched base with him not long ago to see how it's going. And I said, yeah, so anything popping out? And he goes, you got to talk about it on trombone. I was like, okay, trombone, but apparently he had recorded like a professor of trombone, and the guy came up to him afterwards and said, like, I've been doing this for 16 years, and this is the first time that the mic recording sounds the way the trombone does in my head.
Wow.
And so I thought that was just a fantastic compliment. That was, nice to hear.
Well, it's interesting hearing you talk about, like, quit asking about EQ, because there is a quality to it that is just a richness, it's a richness of tone that's nice to hear. And that's one of the things that's nice about recording with a ribbon like that, is you can take an instrument, and because it doesn't have frequencies, things that are, reaching out and trying to punch you in the face, it allows you to sort of bring the whole thing forward, turn it up a little bit more. Like I feel like you get to listen into the tones of stuff. I use the H44 next. So the first one, Rockstars, I described was the 44S, a pair of those as overheads. And then I took out the H44 and experimented on recording my acoustic. I was working on a song, and I had put down an initial acoustic on a condenser, and it sounded good, but it had this sort of like familiar edge to it, like an aggressive mid and upper frequencies that was sort of, I felt like right away with my condenser mic, I felt like, oh, I'm going to have to manage that. I'm going to have to tone that down. Where does this guitar sit in the mix? And then I re-recorded my guitar just on the H44, and I turned it around to the backside. So it was using the, do you have a name for the traditional voicing, the not vocal voicing?
No, really, just the backside. But
okay,
there
the
you go.
backside. I've turned it on the booty side, and it sounded great. It's like digging in with a pick and playing punchy chords on the acoustic. The attack of the acoustic no longer bothered me. I just felt like I could just hear the tone of it and turn it up, and so that's a cool experience for me. And then when I turned it around to the vocal side and I started doing vocals. I think this is important to talk about because my first impression was I wasn't sure what I was hearing. And I wasn't sure. I thought it was actually very like dark. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's very dark. And then I started reaching for EQ and stuff and experimenting, thinking like, well, what if I crank up the EQ on the top and stuff? And then I turned off the EQ and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to actually, gain this up properly, and I'm just going to turn it up in my headphones more. And it's one of those things that happens when you listen to a vocal mic, that I'm learning more about by putting myself in the recording position. You kind of don't know what it sounds like while you're recording it, because it's a weird combination of you hear your voice in your own body and your own head, but you're also hearing it come back through a microphone into your earphones. And if you ever experiment with flipping the polarity on what you hear in your earphones, you're immediately struck by like, whoa, that sounds really different, And that's because it's combining the phase of the actual instrument, our voice, with what's playing in our ears. So what I learned was get a good level. Don't worry about EQ. I set the mic in a good position for my voice. It wasn't like I wasn't eating the mic, and it wasn't far away. It was just about like, maybe like 10 inches from my voice or 9 inches or something like that. Cause I wanted to let the sound come out and not have a lot of proximity right off the bat. And then when I pressed play and played it back, all of a sudden it was like light bulbs went off and I was like, oh, there's the sound, So I just thought that was worth pointing out, how important it is when we're doing our vocals in particular to just kind of set it and forget it, like get the level, and then in the listening stage, really understand what it's sounding like on our voice.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I'm also just so happy that you got to try it out on vocals, because that's something that people don't expect to hear it on. And as I'm hearing back that, that same engineer actually, uses it on overheads. And now a couple months down the line, he's like, I'm actually using it on vocals now. Like people don't think of using a ribbon on vocals. And so getting people to try it is good. So I'm very glad that you got a chance. And I agree with you on the hearing it in your head versus the playback.
Yeah. So when you say like people don't expect to use a ribbon on vocals, I think it's because a lot of the times our experience with ribbons have been, oh, we're trying to do something dark, or we're trying to do something moody or retro.
Yes.
And what's beautiful about the Alder Audio H44 is it's none of those things. It's like totally current sounding and modern, and it feels full frequency to me, in a way that I'm not like leaving something on the on the table with the recording. I guess to use like, like a financial analogy or something.
Yeah.
There's I feel like I'm capturing everything that's there. So, another place that it could sound really great on is electric guitar, for example. Sometimes electric guitars can have too much bite, or you're trying to record something that's got a bright attack on it, and a condenser can definitely sound really bright. And I think there's a reason why, the SM57 has been such an iconic workhorse in the studio for electric guitars, because it's managing, it's kind of giving you the middle of the sound. So I think the H44 would sound great on electric. And you guys have some really good examples on your website. Talk a little bit about that. What should we go check out? What's some of your favorite stuff if we want to go listen to examples of your microphones?
Sure. And while I do that, I'll say just ahead of time what you were mentioning about the brightness versus darkness and whatnot. I also came up listening to, as much as I could about recording, and always heard that ribbons are dark. And it was always kind of, ribbons are dark and they're kind of this other category. If you need kind of a particular sound, go with a ribbon. And they were kind of all boxed into one category that way. And recently I heard somebody online say, I don't ever think to myself, oh, I need a ribbon on this. I think to myself, I need an M160 on this, or a 121, or what have you. And I think that that's something that needs to get out there more. And especially like maybe the pro studio world knows it, but the home studio world might not. Like, ribbons are as diverse as condensers and dynamics. Like, you can make them sound very different. And I've also found that they sound very different in different situations. And so you're right that the mic can like, well, you're hearing it on my vocal right now. I don't think it sounds dark.
No, it sounds great. It definitely sounds smooth and full frequency at the same time. It sounds great. But and then we're going to get to examples of audio, but we haven't even mentioned it yet. You did mention pro studios and home studios. It's important for us to point out that your microphones are a great price point. So they're totally affordable for home studios. I mean, if you're looking for a $50 mic, that's not going to do this yet. But your pricing and the way that you're building these mics and making them affordable, talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so there's kind of a story behind that, because I was doing all this development and kind of, building mics. And I actually had a friend of mine that's a drummer who I was bouncing him off of, so we'd get together and I'd hand him a couple, ragtag looking mics built out of pipes or whatever. And he was really liking them. But, he's not a guy who's going to drop a huge amount on studio gear. He's doing all of it out of his home. And he gave me such an immediate reference for how valuable this was, like how much he just appreciated that ability to record with a ribbon in his space. And I didn't want to lose that. So when I decided to actually fire it up and put it on the market, my goal was, some people, when you start a business, say, price it to the market. So, take what you have and compare it against everything and put it out there for what you think it's worth, which is good. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I was a bit idealistic about it. So I came up with this whole model of trying to build the company as direct sale only. So I could, only sell direct and kind of take all the cut that would have gone to a distributor and take that off the price. And I wanted to keep it as low as I can, because I had, these guys like my drummer friend in mind to say, I don't want to price them out if I can help it. And so the price of the mic is $400. And for a home studio person, that can even be considered pretty up there. I know in the grand scheme of things, it's considered pretty affordable. But I really tried to fight to keep that number within the budget of the people whose hands I would really like to put it in.
That's amazing. Actually, in my brain, I thought it was more than that. So I was like, wait a minute, are you sure that's the price? And I just looked, and sure enough, that's great, man. And then not only that, but if it's fair to mention this, hopefully this isn't changing. Stop me if it is, but I think you do free shipping as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's amazing. So
in the US at least.
Yeah, in the US. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Cool. And I think you even have like ways to do payments and stuff. So Rockstars, if you are looking for $100 option, there's a payment thing, which I'm noticing too, which could help you do payments of $100. So that's cool, man. Let's talk about where the Rockstars can go hear examples. So if they want to check them out, obviously that's the next question. I know for me, it's always that. It's like, this is all very interesting. Where can I hear it?
Yeah, sure. So, the company's still very new, and so there's not a lot of user demos online, but there is a small but growing set of demos on my YouTube channel and the Alder website. They're the same videos, but so you can go to alderaudio.com and just click on the demo page, and our demos will be there. There's a couple of more stripped down versions of, here's a drum demo. I really like our drum demo. It kind of shows a bunch of different positions and solos, different mics. And then there's a couple other soloed sources. But, as somebody who makes mics, I'm like, well, how do I convey this? I don't want to just do kind of unmixed situations, but I don't want to manipulate it and, have something really done up that people can't really hear the mic. So we've got several demos, just the mic, nothing but a master limiter on the track. And then we've got one in particular that was done by a studio in Alabama. Jeremy Stevens at Clearwave Recording Studio did a demo for me with an artist called Lamont Landers, who I just love getting to know. Lamont Landers. He's a great artist, but they did a whole song of his where he cut the track. And so cut it down to just the soloed sections of the mic. So you get to hear the full mix, and then all of a sudden it'll cut to just the raw vocal track. And then you do the full mix and you'll hear just the raw guitar track. And they use it on 5 different sources. And so that's probably the quickest way to get the mic. To get to know the mic. It's on the demo page, and you can hear full mix song and 5 soloed sources inside that song.
We'll include a link in the show notes to Rockstar, so you can just scroll down and go click over to that. And it's very cool, and it's a groovy tune too, and the artist is cool. He's got a cool voice. It's sort of a soul track a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever wished you could remove the click track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I've been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks, with a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. If you've ever wanted to truly feel like a magician in the studio, then iZotope RX is your magic wand. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars, or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you on Instagram about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version are they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or a computer back in the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more mixed-up mix messages from the band. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music, and it all works in your browser with no downloads required. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at Samply.app and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. What are some things that you've explored yourself? So now, one of the things that did stand out to me is on your Instagram channel, there was this recording of you doing Auld Lang Syne, I guess a New Year's tribute. And you had, it looked like you had 3 of the H44s going to record your acoustic and vocal. Talk about that. And talk about anything that you've learned about, effective ways to record acoustic and vocal with your mics.
Sure. Yeah. So I said this before we started up. I don't consider myself by any means a pro engineer, but I've been getting a lot better at it, especially with my own mics. And so every once in a while, I like to put some of my own work on my YouTube channel just to say hello and people can see me, the guy who makes the mics playing music. But on that particular song, I did kind of an interesting mic technique that I stole from some folks on YouTube. So I don't know, maybe you know these guys. Are you familiar with the other favorites, Josh Turner and Carson Mckee?
No, not yet. They need to be future guests on the show.
They are phenomenal. They're phenomenal. They're a duo out of Brooklyn, and they have been quite an inspiration to me because they post a lot of really raw recorded stuff. Like it's still mixed, but they'll just go outside with like a Tascam mic and record two people with it, and then they'll post that, and then they'll do like a really fancy recording with proper mics, and it's very human and kind of shows them.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a mic technique video that I found really valuable, and that's the technique I used for that Auld Lang Syne recording. And so it's kind of a funky stereo recording technique with an acoustic guitar and then a singer. And what you do is on the bridge side of the guitar, you use the figure 8 mic, and you put it just straight above the hand, or like where the bridge meets the guitar, looking straight down at the bridge. And so, your vocal hopefully is going to be in the plane of the null, but the mic is looking straight down at the bridge. And then you put the other guitar mic off the fretboard, kind of pointing, quite off to the side of the guitar on the other side, but kind of pointing towards the neck joint. And then you set the preamp the same on both of those, and you adjust the mic stand positions until the levels are the same. And with those two out there, you get a nice stereo track for like a solo acoustic guitar, but you can manipulate those pretty well to separate the vocal. And so they have a whole, video about it, and then some other techniques, but I actually really enjoy that technique. And before that, I had really struggled with doing like a nice stereo acoustic while singing.
Well, that's cool. That's a great tip. So it's a reminder to us, which we haven't even talked about yet, but what the natural pickup pattern of a ribbon mic is, and of your H44. It's a figure 8 pattern, right? So it's picking up what's in front of it. It's picking up what's behind it. But I think this is true. Like nothing has as strong a rejection as a ribbon does on its sides. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I would say figure 8 in general, but certainly ribbons. The null on the side of a figure 8 is like stronger than the null on, say, the back of a cardioid or anything else. So that's very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So what that means, rock stars, is that you can very selectively, and we've talked about this on the show. We've had guests come and talk about doing sessions with musicians in a round where they use a figure 8 mic or a ribbon in just the right position, and it rejects the musician that's to the side of it. But when you're miking up your acoustic and your voice, for example, it looks like the one that's up above the bridge, while it's as close to your voice as your vocal mic is, it's actually turned in such a way that the rejection is kind of aimed at your voice, so that it's picking up the guitar in front of it, but not your voice on the side, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the important thing to also remember about that null is that it's 360. It's not just on the vertical sides, it's also on the top and the bottom. And
yeah, good point.
Cool. So sometimes if I really want a ribbon mic to reject something, like you can put the side of the mic, towards the thing you want to reject. You can also put the top of the mic, just point the top of the mic if it's a side address, like mine. And that will also be a great way to, null it.
So another example that comes to mind is I remember seeing photographs of the Beatles at Abbey Road, and they had this system of doing overdubs at one point. I hope I'm getting this story exactly right, but they had something where they would bring out these big speakers on stands, and they called them white elephants, I think. And then they would set up a figure 8 mic in front of the speaker, and so that the side of the mic was pointed toward the speaker. So the mic's not hearing the speaker in this space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then two singers could be on either side of the mic singing harmonies, both to each other, and hearing the sound naturally come out of the speaker on, to one side. I suppose you could put a speaker on both sides if you wanted to, but very cool idea. Now, of course, this has to be done in a room where the speaker isn't sort of bouncing around the room itself. So, a space that's kind of dead, or there's, the sound can kind of die off into the rest of the room. But I like that idea a lot because there is this ability to sing when you're just singing naturally in the control room with the speakers on, and a singer just relaxes right into it, and the two members of the band just instantly find the harmony part, and then they go out to the microphone and put the headphones on, and somehow everybody forgot everything that you just figured out a moment ago. But that could be a really cool use case for the ribbon as well, and its figure 8 pickup pattern is doing vocals or harmonies without using headphones.
Yeah. That null is useful in a lot of ways. When I was super early into recordings and I heard that, figure 8 mics were a thing, I was like, when am I ever going to be recording something on both sides of a mic? Like that never happens. Why would I need that? And then you realize that, ribbons, you're hardly ever really trying to record from both sides at the same time. I guess if you're doing mid-side or some particular situations, but the reason that figure 8 is actually preferable is because the null's so good. So it's actually more useful.
Yeah. So I did the Bonnaroo hay bale studio for 15 years. And at one of those points, we brought down the AEA 44.
Oh, nice.
And I had that on a session, and then I used it where I put it up, and two of the harmonies were sang on either side of it. And, it sounds cool. I mean, it's a cool way to do it. Now, of course, the difference there, Rockstars, is that that's a beautiful mic, but that can cost $3,000 to $5,000, I think, for the mic. Yeah. Whereas, you could do the same thing on a lovely sounding Alder Audio H44 for $400, which is a lot more home studio price point. But cool stuff, man. What do any other use cases come to mind? Some of the people using it and sort of surprising you, like what's the craziest situation that somebody's reported back to you recording with the mic where you thought, oh, wow, I didn't know it was going to do that?
I don't know if I've heard about anything crazy or unexpected, but one thing that does pop out is this technique on the kick drum. So normally you think with a ribbon, you just want to stay away from the kick drum at all costs. I mean, what we really want to stay away from is the port for the airflow. That's kind of a big no-no. But there's this technique out there. I don't even know if it has a proper name, but maybe you're familiar with it. You put the ribbon figure 8 on the side of the kick drum, right in the middle. So it's parallel with the kick drum. And okay. I think the idea is that with a figure 8 polar pattern, it's getting positive pressure from the front and negative pressure from the back of the kick drum, while kind of rejecting the side where the shell is. And this engineer was trying to describe it to me. He said you kind of avoid that basketball-like sound that can kind of happen in a kick drum. And he said, I don't really know how to explain it. I just know it sounds sick. So
that's cool. All right, we're gonna have to break this down a little bit more, make sure I'm picturing this right. So the kick drum. So let's say I'm the drummer, or no, let's say I'm the engineer. I'm walking up to the the front resonator head of the kick drum, mm-hmm. where I might typically put a mic in that sound hole on the kick drum. If I looked up over the kick drum, I'd see the drummer sitting there in front of me on the other end of the kick drum. So if we're in that position, are we putting the H44 in front of that front head, or are we going around to the side of the wooden side of the kick drum and doing something over there?
Yeah, to the side like that. So probably you'd prefer the left side, because typically, you got your snare on your right that you're probably trying to avoid. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it sits where your ride cymbal stand would be. And, so you're right next to the shell in the middle of the kick drum, and you're not even pointing the mic at the kick drum. You're just letting the front of the mic, face the same direction as the front head of the kick drum would be. The back of, the mic is facing the same direction as the back of the kick drum. Mm-hmm. So it's not pointed at it, but low frequencies in general are also these big sound waves, and they bend around things really well. And so, when you do that, somehow it gets it's like a snare on the top and the bottom. You want to, flip the phase and get both of them. It's it's kind of doing that in one microphone for the kick drum. Yeah. And it's a great way to record a kick with a ribbon.
Very cool. And then how close do you think it would be to the shell of the drum?
Oh, maybe like an inch. I mean, it's just
Okay.
right next to it. Yeah. And
Okay,
it could
cool.
be other places. It could be on the top or wherever. I think the left side probably makes the most sense. But the whole technique idea is just parallel with the kick drum, right in the middle of the shell.
That's cool. And one of the tricks that we do sometimes is we put a mic up above the kick where it's kind of between the two toms and the snare, and maybe it's even pointed towards the snare. So that could be something that's worth experimenting with this too, because you could pivot this mic in the direction of the snare. So it's sort of facing it if you wanted to get that sound in the mic, but it would still be rejecting the kick drum coming out of the shell below it. So that's pretty exciting. Cool trick. I'm gonna have to try that out.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'd imagine that if you're trying to come up with an interesting technique to record drums with like as little mics, as few mics as possible, that would be an interesting way to try to capture kick and snare in one mic.
Yeah. Now, the other thing to remind us of is you were saying that it would reject the top just as well as the sides. So if that ride or the cymbal is above the mic, it's actually helping to reject that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, what about recording snare with the mic? Have you had anybody do some snare, use it right on the snare or close to the snare?
I have not had anybody report trying my mic as close to the snare. I had a discussion with somebody just about ribbon mics on snares in general, who was just a fan of basically miking the entire kit with ribbon mics everywhere. But nothing particular to my mic. I think people just don't think to use it there, and I haven't experimented with it myself, actually. So maybe I should.
Well, what comes to mind, of course, is that you're always like, how do I get a mic on the snare but not have hi-hat in it? I suppose if the hi-hat's in the rejection zone of the mic, that might do a pretty good job of it. And if the back of the mic is sort of pointed away from another cymbal as well, you may get a good result. But Rockstars, if you've experimented with a ribbon on a snare, or you've got any other cool placements that you've done with ribbons, drop a comment into this episode, wherever you're listening to it, if you can, and give us some of your thoughts on it and feedback. That'd be really cool. 50 years ago, William G. Dilley introduced the world to his revolutionary new dynamics processor, the Model 610 Comp Limiter. A truly unique device, the Model 610 was not only the fastest, cleanest, and quietest of its type, but was also capable of providing completely separate peak limiting and compression functions. Today, Spectra 1964 introduces the Model C610 Comp Limiter, described as the most versatile piece of audio gear you can buy. Great for adding control and power to everything from vocals, guitars, and bass to mixing and even mastering, the C610 gives you the same massive sound that rocked legendary studios like Stax, Arden, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant. I'm using the C610 on every record I make at the Toy Box Studio, and you should too. You'll love it. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini, and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries at my studio, and it works great. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. All right, well, let's see. So moving around. We've got the website. We took a look at that. There's some great examples there. You sort of talk about your background and the history of the company and I've got examples and everything like that. What else do I want to say? Maybe have you gotten any feedback on using it on bass or for bass guitar or miking up a bass amp? I mean, you pointed out that when you use it on a kick drum, it's not really the volume level of the kick drum that is an issue. It's the blast of air that comes out through that cut in the front head. Because again, the air movement can destroy a fragile ribbon. And yours is a tough ribbon, but let's not push it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have received some feedback of people that just liked it on bass, not a whole lot more than that. But that is always kind of a topic because, I mean, if you really crank a bass amp, like, I mean, you're moving a lot of air at some point. And but I haven't looked into that in depth. Like, at what point is using one of my ribbon mics in front of a bass cab concerning or not? It probably depends on the situation, the proximity, and whatnot. But I do know that people have used it and really like how it sounds on bass. I just kind of recommend caution.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to know from the rock stars about what they need in a mic, or what what kind of stuff they're looking for in their studio? Anything that comes to mind?
Oh, that catches me off guard.
We like to do that here at Studio Rockstars.
Well, the thing, so, I'll just say from my perspective that the thing I'm always looking for more of is usually feedback on my mic. I mean, that guy who said, use it on trombone, I never tried it on trombone, that was really insightful. And so I think in general, I'm still coming from that background way back when I kind of viewed ribbon mics as this niche alternative color mic that you only use for drum overheads and guitar cabs. And so, but now that I've been looking into it more, I'm seeing people use ribbon mics in a lot of really interesting, fun ways. There's some folks out there that have a popular YouTube channel, Scary Pockets, and they use AEA KU5A, I believe it is. It's a ribbon vocal mic, and it sounds great. And so I think talking more about ribbon mics and how they don't just have to stay in those two places, and getting more feedback on how to use them in kind of non-traditional areas. Any conversation like that's always helpful. What are you using a ribbon on that people would be surprised you're using a ribbon on it?
Yeah. And a good place to go share that with us too, Rockstars, is we have a Facebook group. If you're not already in it, just search for Recording Studio Rockstars in Facebook groups. And as long as I'm still using Facebook, we'll still be there. and you can just ask to join, and then we'll make sure you answer the questions when you ask to join, because that's how we filter out all the spam. But then come on in and put some examples up, ask some questions, get other people talking about it. We'll make sure Tyler's in there too, so you can ask any questions there if you want. And then, do you have another place that you try and have conversations with everybody, Tyler, that you want them to know about?
Not much. I mean, people can reach me directly through like my contact page on my website, or there's the YouTube channel or Instagram. That's pretty much where I'm at.
Okay, cool. All right, let me talk about proximity effect. So,
oh yeah,
what is proximity effect? How would you describe it for your microphones, and how would we experience it if we were using the H44?
Yeah, so proximity effect is just the phenomenon that as you get closer to the mic, you'll hear more lows in proportion to the rest of the mic. So
is it fair to ask why?
do you have an hour? Because I've gone into this. Like I know scientifically why the proximity effect happens, and it would take me a bit, because it took me a bit to understand it. And so off the top, it would be a poor decision to try to describe it off the top of my head, because
it's a little bit like that kick drum, where it's like the low frequencies are kind of everywhere, but the high frequencies aren't, or something like that. And anyway, I once saw an explanation. I was like, whoa, that makes sense. But just know, Rockstars, that it's there. One day you can take the time to understand the why of proximity effect. But what does it sound like?
Well, so like if I get deeper to my mic, I'm close up on it, you can hear my voice is louder, but it's also kind of more radio deep. So that's a live demonstration of proximity effect. And I'll say with microphones in general, proximity effect is greatest on figure 8 microphones.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so with my mic, it'll have some proximity effect to it. You'll definitely notice it, which I see it definitely as a feature. Like there's some mics out there that don't have proximity effect, and that's nice for the consistency. But
especially Omni microphones.
Yeah, Omnis don't really have it.
Yeah.
But Figure 8 has it a lot. But that really allows you to dial in. It's like you've got this kind of how the mic feels, factor to it. So you want more low end, you bring it in closer. And I would say in general with my mic on the front, you're going to get some proximity effect, but it tends to do okay, like not overbearing on the front. On the back, the mic has a lot of low end. So when you get close on the back, it gets pretty boomy. But the good thing of that is when you back it off. So when you use the back side of the mic, a mic that has a lot of low end, and you back it off, then you still get enough low end. Because that's the thing with some mics, if they're more normally used up close, when you're gaining that proximity effect, when you pull them back, they can sound kind of tinny.
Yeah, the 57 can sometimes sound that way too. It's sort of a balancing act with that. But that's what's cool about using a ribbon, using the H44 with this Figure 8 pickup pattern and proximity, is it allows you to back away from an instrument and let the instrument breathe through the air a little bit more as it gets to the microphone. And again, because of the rejection zones, if you're moving that mic back from a guitar amp, now you'll hear the amp bounce off the floor midway up to the microphone, but you're not going to hear, you just, it's sort of rejecting the floor that's underneath it and the walls that it might be near. Right? Is that fair to talk about it like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in general, with a guitar amp, it's loud enough that, the room noise is less concerning in that situation. But backing it up off a guitar amp is always a good thing to check out. It does sound all right up close, but I was, letting it breathe a little bit's a good thing.
Yeah. So maybe don't eat the grill when you stick the H44 on an amp, but do try it because it might sound cool. You might have a thin sound coming out and it sort of fills it out and makes it sound the way you wish it did.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about microphones. Like, I love microphones. And as everybody out there will know, like, it's not about having the one do it all microphone. It's about having all the options at your fingertips to adapt to where you're at. And so, I think that's just fun, like I wouldn't want there to be one super microphone that you just buy it and that's the last one you ever need. Like it's fun to paint with all these different colors.
I wouldn't want that either because I'm usually using more than one microphone. So I kind of don't really like having to think too hard about like, well, which mic should I use for what? It's kind of nice when you're like, well, I like to look at what I'm about to do with the bands and the instrument and stuff. I mean, band in the studio and think, all right, I've got this instrument covered. I've got that instrument covered. I've got everything covered. That's the way I like to think about things instead of like, well, I could use this on that instrument or I should use it over here or over there. It's nice to have the versatility, but it's also nice to be able to just kind of, know what you're going to go for. So I guess you just got to get a lot of H44s, use them everywhere. What are some things that when you think about what's coming next for you, what's some stuff you're excited about next?
Well, I am not as excited, but it's still good to just think about rolling a little bit more with volume. Like, we're picking up a little bit. At the beginning, I wasn't too forward about getting my name out there because I wanted to kind of get a good start and not be able to be slow and not be pushing production. Like, I got to get these out. Just take my time, make sure everybody's happy, get feedback, that kind of thing. So I'm starting to open it up, get my name out there a little bit more. So I'm excited to see it pick up in volume. But I'll say the other half of my brain is always like, I'm always more excited about development. And so, I would love to get to the place where I could launch total redesign ribbon microphone number 2. Like maybe I've got some ideas for like a only vocal ribbon microphone that would be, totally given to designing it for vocals. I also I'm doing a little bit on possibly looking at tweeters. So my herringbone corrugation would go really well in a tweeter, and I'm going to own that IP for both ribbons and tweeters, and so that's kind of interesting. I always have those ideas going.
That's cool, man. That's fun stuff. What about things that you're excited about just for yourself in your studio making music?
Well, I'll say I didn't have a drum set, and I bought one in December, and I'm learning to play drums because
Sweet.
yeah, like and I'm like, I'm 35. You can learn to play drums at that age. It's like I haven't missed it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just enjoying that. I'm enjoying like the fact that I have music as a more central part of my career now has these side effects of like, well, now it makes a lot more sense to either learn drums or like review my guitar pedal board or practice solos. And so I do a lot of music on the side, and it's a lot easier to do that now than it used to be. So I'm just excited to get better at recording and playing and making music.
Yeah, that's fun stuff, man. And the cool thing about getting into the other instruments is you can start experimenting with recording, using your mics and sort of begin to understand. You can try out the kick mic technique. You can try it out as an overhead. You can put it on a snare and see what it sounds like.
Yeah, I want that perspective. I want to be able to, I mean, drum set especially being such a core instrument for ribbon mics, I want to be able to have the perspective of a drummer listening to the mic on the drums instead of just somebody trying to understand it from outside the instrument. So I'd really like to have firsthand experience of how that feels.
Yeah, and again, I encourage you you've probably already been there, but hear your voice on the mic and rediscover that difference between what you hear when you're actually singing versus what you hear on playback. It's just a remarkable thing to me. And it's funny because there are things that I can do as an engineer in the control room that I just can't do the same way if I'm recording myself, because when you're not playing the instrument, you can sit there and listen and dial different things in and really hear it coming out of the speakers. I mean, I can do it if I'm playing electric guitar or something where all I hear is what's coming out of the speakers. But, to do it on an acoustic instrument, drums, acoustic guitar, vocals, things like that, it's, you kind of have to, I like it when I do sessions and I can get all the settings for somebody else and then I just don't change them and I go out there and record myself afterwards.
Yeah.
Just be like, it sounded good on them. It's probably going to sound good on me. Let me ask you this. Do you have any, well, I like to ask guests for an inspirational quote, actually. Is there anything that you want to share about your process for music or for business or anybody that's just really inspired you?
Well, so I know that this is a question you ask, and so I was thinking about it, and a friend recently brought up a famous quote to me that I hadn't thought about in a long time, and I love it. I think it's really great for anything where you're creating, and it's a famous one. It's the Teddy Roosevelt "It's not the critic who counts" quote. Are you familiar with this one?
I'm about to be.
All right. Well, it's a little bit long, but I mean, it's a great quote. I think it's worth reading. All right.
Let's do it.
So here it is. It says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But those who actually strive to do the deeds, who know great enthusiasms, the great devotions who spend, the one of great devotions who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat."
That's great, man. I'm going to immediately point out rock stars. That's you who's talking about right there. There's that difference between being a critic of music and what you hear coming out of the speakers and making it yourself.
Yeah. Putting yourself out there. It's big. And it's a bit long, but I love his words there. They're really encouraging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so familiar with that struggle, like, just keep trying to get it right and come up short somewhere and then make an adjustment and try and do it again. There must have been some stories of, kind of important failures for you as you either in music or as you were trying to develop this microphone. Is there anything that was sort of a nightmare moment that turned into a really good learning experience for you?
Well, I mean, I already talked about failing with my 5 pickup Stratocaster, so that was
Right.
one. But another good one is actually the Cajon project that I talked to you about. So
We're hoping that you're sitting on your cajon right now for this interview. Can we hear it?
I am not, but it's not far away. But my brother builds cajones, and he's a drummer, and so he had done all this work, and he's a little better with wood than I am, and I wanted to do one too. So and this is like a hand plane project, the old like sharpen your blade and plane it down. And I was in Vermont at the time, so I got like local rock maple from somebody, which is sugar maple, and so it was this cool local wood and all this. And I mean, that project just kicked my butt. Like I was just going to town with the plane, just, chunking things out of the wood, and it looked like crap. But I was like, well, I already spent this money on this nice wood, and it would be a shame if I never got it done. And so it just became kind of this project from hell that never ended, just to make a stinking cajon that I could,
the thinnest cajon in the world, because you had to keep planing it down further and further, right?
Well, no, it was actually foolish because I wanted it to be like really big. So, and I'm really tall. I'm 6'4", and so it's actually a monstrous cajon. It's like unplayable by anyone but me because it's too tall. But it was such a bear to make it. But what I realized is by the end, I was kind of, frustrated that I even started the project. I was like, I wish I wouldn't have even spent the money on the wood and the time. And I did get it done, and I was happy that I got it done. But it wasn't until about 2 weeks later that I was like, no, I'm glad I did that. I learned things doing that. Like that was a good use of my time, even though it was frustrating and stuff. And for me, that's a big theme for me, to learn to do projects, even like the ribbon mic, and not need it to succeed. Like I'm okay if it fails. If I have another cajon-like project, I'm not going to say I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to get back up and say that was worth it, even though it was a failure. And so that's kind of a big personal thing of mine.
Okay, cool. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. Well, we are coming up near the end of the show, but maybe we can still hit some of the jam session questions and we can just kind of fire right through them if you want.
Sure.
All right. So when you started out in recording, what do you feel like was holding you back?
So when I started out in recording, I wanted to record original songs of myself and acoustic guitar. And I think that that's incredibly difficult because it's songwriting, it's arrangement, it's mic placement. And also, when you only have yourself and an acoustic guitar, you need a really great, capture of that source, because it's not like you're blending all together these other sources. So what I would tell myself at that time is go record a cover for practice, because then you're not worried about your songwriting or your arrangement or anything. And that'll be a lot quicker than trying to do original music where you're kind of judging everything at the same time.
Okay, yeah, that's a good tip. I do a little bit of that, and every time I do it, I'm like, man, that sounded great. And then every time I do original, I'm like, There's parts of it I like, and there's parts of like, that was so stupid, dude. Why'd you do that?
I know. And it's impossible to separate that thing in the back of your mind from you evaluating your skill at mixing. They just get all meshed together. And so like, I remember once I played, it was just like Country Roads Take Me Home. And I played a cover exactly the way I saw somebody else covered on YouTube with a solo acoustic. And I did it just as an experiment. When I got done, I was like, this is a lot better than I thought I could record myself, because I had taken out all of those back of my brain concerns.
Well, it's a really good learning method too, because you're studying the masters, basically. You're saying, what does it feel like, sound like? How do the words roll off? How does the guitar strumming feel? All that, how does the length of the song feel? Did I feel like going to the outro when the outro happened? All that kind of stuff. What about some of the best advice you remember receiving, whether it's recording or business stuff, for your building microphones?
Best advice. I think I saw this question ahead of time and I've forgotten the answer to it.
Well, you were talking about inspirations. I mean, we joked about Edison being similar. Are there, you watched your dad run a business too. What about that? I mean, that must have been an inspiration for you.
It absolutely was. And I'd say that the advice that I took more from that whole experience than anything singularly said is just kind of the courage to step up and just try things, even when there's a giant wall in front of you that says you can't do this, or this is silly or stupid. People don't think you can manufacture things in the US anymore. And my dad was like, we're just going to make this thing happen. And he just went for it. And so I've kind of got that spirit. And I think that spirit has been a very big thing.
Well, that's a cool thing to hear. I mean, a parallel, of course. Well, you're here. You are manufacturing microphones in the U.S. and starting and growing this business, which is great. But a parallel that I think we can all feel too in music is like this idea. It's how common is it that somebody's like, yeah, go do your music. Good luck succeeding at it, or like, oh, music streaming, nobody makes any money, you can get pennies or whatever. There's a million obstacles out there for doing music. So remembering to just go for it and don't let that stuff get you down is good advice.
Yeah, get rid of that fear of failure.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about a favorite hardware tool, something physical you love having around when you're either recording music or maybe just while you're working building stuff.
Sure. So I'll do a studio or at least guitar item. I recently have been reviewing my guitar rig, and I didn't have a compressor on my electric guitar. And some people go with or without guitar pedal compressors. And so I got a nice one. I got the Cali 76 from Origin Effects. It's a guitar compressor pedal based off the 1176. And it sounds fantastic. And the clean tones you can get with a compressor are just so much better than without it. If you're doing a lot of distortion, then maybe you don't need it. But guitar compressor pedal for clean tones, thing I didn't even know I needed. And I love it.
I agree 100%. And I think an important takeaway for me was recognizing that stop thinking about a guitar compressor pedal as somehow being the same thing as a compressor on the recording end of your chain. Like yes, they both compress, but you get a totally different results and a totally different playability. And a compressor pedal on the guitar lets you really have a light touch and get a whole lot of voice out of your instrument, which can be really cool for certain parts.
Yeah, it feels different to play.
Yeah. All right, cool. How about a resource or a tip for the business side of doing things? Any advice you want to share with the rock stars?
On a business side, this is quite boring, but I just did my taxes, and the QuickBooks is owned by the same person as TurboTax. So you got to do that stuff with a business, and they work really well together. So a lot of people use it. It's very common, but I'll just say for starting a business and filing my taxes of a business for the first year, combo of QuickBooks and TurboTax was super helpful.
Okay, good tip. Yeah, tax is boring. But so is going to jail. All right, so we're going to take the final question here. This one's hypothetical, and you're going to go back in time and find young Tyler, who's maybe thinking like, geez, maybe I'll build a cajon one day because I really like music. or whatever it is. And you just say, listen, dude, here's the single most important thing you need to know to become a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I would like to go back and tell myself exactly what we were talking about before. Go record covers. Stop, doing your own stuff and use covers to evaluate your recording skills. It'll make you go so much faster than trying to do it all at once.
Okay, cool. Anything you picked up or learned along the way about what you can do with a cover song after you've recorded it? Like, can you just throw it on YouTube? Can you put it out somehow? Is that the right question to ask?
Well, so I'd say do it for one, just do it for learning. That's what I have in my head of like, it just teaches you a lot faster. But of course, like you can throw it out on YouTube. I'm recording a funky version of House of the Rising Sun right now that I'll put out on my personal channel. So,
okay, cool, man. Right on. Well, then I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the show. We've sadly come to the end of this first episode, and hopefully we'll be seeing and hearing more of each other in the future. How can the rock stars find you online? Where would you like them to go have a look at these beautiful microphones and the other content that you're creating? And if they've got questions for you about recording or any questions for you about the ribbon mic, how would you like them to reach out to you?
Best place is the website, alderaudio.com. And the contact page there actually goes right to me. So if you got a question for me, feel free to throw it in the contact page. Otherwise, on Instagram, Alder Audio.
Fantastic. I think I forgot to ask you this. What's the derivation of Alder Audio, the name?
Oh, man. So we went through tons of names. And at one point I had written down like just the values that I wanted. I wanted something simple but solid, but the mics are natural. And I'd written down all these words. And it was actually my wife who wrote down a bunch of things. And one of them was hardwoods. And she wrote down alder. And she didn't even know that Fender guitars are made out of alder. And then I looked into it, and alder is this local, sustainable, it works, but it's not overly expensive. And it just and it's, it's wood, so it's natural. And it just kind of contained all these things that I wanted to launch the company with, kind of sensible, solid design that's sustainable and affordable.
That's amazing, dude. Well, we'll have to have you back sometime and we can talk more about that too, because you'll probably have a lot more to say about it one day. But I'm sure we'd all be very interested to hear the ways that you are able to grow this. I mean, we're talking about metals and ribbons and electronic components and screens and, even plastics and containers for shipping and holding the mic and stuff. So it'll be cool to hear the ways that you're able to tie all that together.
Yeah, there's plenty more to think about and new ideas on the brain all the time.
And then I guess we never even mentioned too, Rockstars, Tyler reached out to me because I think you've been listening to Recording Studio Rockstars yourself.
Oh man, I am one of the rock stars. Absolutely. Like I used to listen to you with an earbud while making glue in a lab all the time.
That's hilarious. That's
so that great, I'm sure you wonder where do people listen? So that was me.
That's great. Yep. Well, I like to say you say you were listening to me, but hopefully we're listening to our guests like you, because that's the beauty of doing this. So there you go, Rockstars. I don't even know why I waited till the last second to think of it, but sometimes my questions aren't written down in the right order. So Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on the show, man. It's an absolute honor to meet you and hear your story. And thank you for building beautiful microphones for us in our studios. Rockstars, please scroll down to the show notes, click through, go check them out. This is a very affordable, very top-end sounding mic to me. And so I highly recommend you go check it out for your studio. So thank you, Tyler. Great to meet you, man.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Groovy. And thanks for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you around the studio. Cheers, Tyler. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who helped make this episode possible. API, OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, SonarWorks, and Isotope. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of their plugins. And sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at sampley.app, or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. And don't forget to use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in the description of the podcast. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to give a big thank you to our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks, guys. And thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.